On today's episode, we'll be highlighting the trailblazing efforts of a leader and a former student of ACity University, and we are going to look at how he rose to become a CEO. Without wasting any more time, we have here with us Barnabas. So Barnabas, what we do on the show is you introduce yourself, you say something interesting about yourself, and then we go on to the conversation.
Hi, my name is Barnabas NOMO, co-founder and CEO of Goliath Robotics, a research-driven mobility company based in Accra, Ghana.
Okay. And what is interesting about you, Barnabas?
I started learning to draw this year.
Okay.
So I think that's the most interesting thing about me right now.
Do you draw to work? So I visit you one time and see what you've been able to put together.
I'm at a point where when I draw something, people recognize it for what I think it is. It's still within, maybe I could draw a pen and someone say that looks like a pen.
Okay.
But, it's not, it has a lot of work to be done, like for me to know that I can really draw.
Okay. So I think even, let me latch on that a little. So when people don't see what you see, what keeps you building?
A couple of things, actually. I think for the most part, or the kind of relationship I had with my dad, he always made my brother and I very interested in taking challenges. And so, even when I used to work before starting the business, everybody knew if you were talking to Barnabas, make whatever they are going to do seem like it's super challenging and very interesting. So, of course, the thrill of trying to do something for the first time and figuring it out, it has to be interesting. And also, I think the biggest motivator is selfishly has to be very interesting to me, but also if there is some grand benefit to society, then that happens. But I always like to highlight my personal interest more because sometimes your passion or motivation may dwindle and it could just be your internal curiosity or your value system that you may have to rely on to get things done. Also, I like to make a lot of big claims and the fear of shame, right? Like you said you were going to do this, so now show results. But I think generally, if you love what you do, you rarely have to think about, or you really need an external stimulus to keep moving because you just really love what you're doing.
Now I'm interested. You did mention foundational Barnabas, how you were able, or how you're perceived from your family era. Now let's look at how the scholarship advantage you got. How were you able to mark your growth? How was Barnabas then, and how was Barnabas post scholarship?
So that's a very interesting thing, actually, because anyone who knew me before coming to ACity, or when I was in my first year, my mates will tell you, I used to get a lot of visitors because nobody could believe that I had actually gone to college, right? I didn't really plan to go to school after high school because I started building tech very early. I was 16 when I had my first tech job. And it was like to help a housing company digitize their records and stuff like that. And so ever since then, I just kept getting more and more jobs. And I like that. Sorry. I like that a lot. I also used to, while I was in high school, I used to help people build like their final year projects. And so in my head, it was more like, what are people learning in university? Why do I need to go? And so I'm saying that to say no one actually believed that I had committed to going to a university. So that was kind of my my thought process before going to school. But I guess some stuff happened while I used to work, and I just realized, I may need to improve myself and, also just try and get ahead and have a degree. Initially that was the main plan. Oh, let me just get a degree so I could go back to doing the things I was doing. But before coming to school, I remember talking to my dad about these things. And he used to tell me, look, you should really open your eyes to this whole experience and don't be in school with one leg in and still doing the things you're doing. You should probably try and experience the whole thing about school. And so he used to tell me things about, universities would not really do anything to change your life if you do not take advantage of the opportunities available.
Right.
And part of it was, he was like, make sure you make good connections, make sure you have friends. You don't need to be friends with everybody, but find people who you think X amount of time from now, if I needed to do something really crazy, who do I call who can deliver reliably and build a strong network of such people? And so, I mean, some of it's trickled down into things. For example, my whole team right now is people that I met on campus, right?
Okay.
Who are, I mean, transitioned into full-time roles, leading technology for us, for example. But it was being able to recognize opportunities like that. Well, like when I was on campus, I was on a full scholarship. And so I didn't have to worry about, I mean, tuition or anything. Fun fact about me, I've actually been on scholarship my whole life since I was about 8 years old.
Oh,
So yeah, my dad has never really had
I'm
to
sure you're
pay.
praised highly at home.
I mean, you should meet my brother. Set the bar so high that, I mean, I talk about him all the time. My whole team knows how high a bar my brother set for me that I am not sure I have attained that level yet, but it's all cool. I think, and it's really funny because, I'm sorry to detour, but the reason why I actually got really good in tech was because I was very jealous of my brother. We had a music teacher, and growing up, I realized there was nothing I could do to be better at music than my brother. He could play every instrument. My friends thought he was cooler. So when I got exposed to engineering, I was like, okay, finally something my brother can see. But then he was super supportive of me. So I grew up and I felt, I feel really bad that I was ever jealous of this guy. But anyway, so we had a lot of these conversations with my dad, and he used to tell me, especially for someone like me, coming to school, a lot of people saw it more as I had taken a step back in life, right? Because for you're earning a lot, you live in this fancy place, and now you live in a small cubicle, and you're surrounded by young people, and you're not doing as things that people find as cool as previously. You're not earning as much as you used to, and so those things can be very unsettling, right? Especially, and I think this is a very unique perspective just because of my background before coming to uni. But so we had this whole regiment for making sure that I was able to stay in school. I think I tell a lot of people a lot that in my third year, I almost dropped out because it was just super unsettling. But I still pushed through because I just had a system of trying to be accountable. Like, what did I get done today? How am I leveraging these opportunities? And the most important thing is, when we started our business, for example, it used to just be a passion project we were doing on campus, but I didn't need to pay electricity for it.
Right.
I didn't need to pay machinists to do any of the difficult work, and you should see the quotes we get for some of these things, right? Sometimes just to do a small part, the company needs to make a mold first, and that's like $2,000 before, right? And now I could just walk into the workshop and get machines running at any point in time. I mean, when I was here, I used to run the workshop with my co-founder.
Right.
And so it was always open, like 24/7. So that was a really good foundational opportunity for me that I think if I hadn't come to Academic City, I probably would be doing these, but it would have been several degrees more difficult because I would have had to worry about a lot of things like rent, just right off the bat. Or like even self-sustenance and a lot of things. And so, yeah, I think that's what, I don't know if I answered.
Yeah, no, you did. And I mean, it's very clear that you were always ambitious, but Academic City eased you into kind of figuring a few things out because of the other opportunities that came with the scholarship, like you're saying, the rent and a few other things, maybe opportunity to people. Now, let's move into maybe something that's a little uncomfortable. You mentioned, now for everybody else who's watching, you mentioned how you have a brother who is on a high pedestal, maybe in your house, and also how unsettling it was in school. Let's look at the hardest part of being a tech mogul like you are now. Let's say, how do you stay grounded, or how are you staying grounded now?
So to stay grounded, I actually have a very supportive, family. I think, especially on graduation, I'm sure, I mean, if the company, well, of course, I know we're in a good place right now, but things hadn't worked out, I'm sure there would be a poster of me here about this guy's probably the most stupid person we know. And the reason is that I had a lot of really good offers that were really going to be well paying. And I was like, I want to try this because I'm really young now and I want to really experience these. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back and try to work. Well, since I've been a kid, my whole thing about my dad and my mom is they're either actively in support of you or actively against you.
Right.
So when I say against you, it's not just like, oh, you don't have our blessing, but like, we'll go talk to whoever you're going to do this with and tell them not to. Like, that's how active they are. But then, I managed to convince them. Like, I always call my dad a lot. I think he's a guy who really, he did a lot of things in his life. He had a really difficult life. And because of that, he had to learn a lot of things that were not necessarily useful to him at the time, but he just needed that to get by. And so he has a very strong economics background, but he's also a very good counselor. So I'm able to call my dad almost every day if I have a problem. I mean, this year we had some really big problems. And while we were navigating it, everyone thought, oh, you did this with such a clear head and a very level head and you knew what to do. But it's always because I was calling my dad, right? And so I have people like that. I think I have been blessed to be surrounded by people who really just genuinely care about my well-being because I think oftentimes, especially when you want to get something off the ground, you approach it from a very sacrificial perspective where, oh, I don't mind not eating for a couple of days, but that means you probably end up sick. So just having people who look out for you and remind you to pause. One thing that I really do personally, though, if I have a lot of work piled up and stuff, I try to take active breaks where maybe I'll go outside, go for a walk or do some dangerous activity or, and it just helps reset you and get you back.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. No, and I think that's quite interesting. You're able to let off steam by going back to the support system or by going back to the foundation, like we mentioned initially. I'm quite intrigued, especially pertaining to the name of your company. What is the meaning behind the name Goliath Robotics? And tell us what the inspiration to the whole company is about.
Thank you. That's actually, I think this is a question I answer a lot everywhere I go. And it's really simple. I have a very big love for literature, right?
Okay.
And I was actually, the story came from David and Goliath in the Bible. And my perspective for that story is really, it's also an exercise that we did in one of our classes here, where you'd read a text and you try to isolate some context and create your own context and see based on your value system, how do you interpret this? I think it was either com skills or critical thinking, one of those courses. So it was really more about, okay, if I take the story of David and Goliath and I isolated all the spirituality from it, is it possible that David could have still beaten Goliath? And the answer is yes, because he had a more advanced technology, right? Okay. So you can look at it from the perspective of, David went to a knife fight with a gun, right? Because that was a sling, very long ranged. And in the hands of a very skilled person, you see videos of people throwing stones with a sling. Yeah. And sometimes the stones break the speed of sound, right? Right. So clearly, this guy had a technological advantage, but it wasn't perceived as such because he only used it to drive wolves away, right? So it was more like, from my perspective, the learnings were, okay, superior technology, but the technology was also very, very cheap because all he needed was the sling and stones, right, that he picked up. And then there was a very big giant who was creating a big problem for a lot of people. And so there are things that I call wicked problems. And a wicked problem is sometimes it seems very humongous, but if you could drop down to the root cause, you could find some ways to try and approach it. So the philosophy of the company just became, can we find problems that seem very big that we can solve for cheap, right? And that's where Goliath Robotics now. It becomes, why didn't we name it David then,
Robotics.
right? But it's because we actively look for the problems, right?
Right.
And I think oftentimes there's a lot of, I wouldn't say bad advice, but well, I would say bad advice that goes around like, oh, don't think about the problem, just bring the solution. But I think it's really in understanding the extent of a problem that you can really solve it. Because I also happen to know this because I used to work with a lot of these donor projects where you may think you're solving a problem for a group of people, but you realize you do not understand the problem enough. And so you're solving the wrong things that you don't need. All right. Yeah.
No, and I think it's very intriguing. Like you mentioned, the name could have been David Robotics, but you are looking at solving it in a much meaningful manner, or like from the root of it. Yeah. And I think that is very worthy to note. Now let's kind of conclude. What is one admonishment? What one admonishment would you give to young? Now I'm not saying you're not young, but what's one admonishment you give to young startups or people who are gauging to be like Goliath Robotics? What's one word of admonishment you'd give them?
Well, just from my perspective as an engineer, I think my word of advice would just come from the most difficult challenge that we've had as a business. And it was really more of me transitioning from technical expertise to becoming a business leader. It's, well, for the company to work, you find out very early that there are certain things you are better off hiring somebody else to do. And there are certain things you have to figure it out because you are the vision, right? And so it's something that, I wouldn't say I've fully figured it out, but I'm able to create a balance between still being like the product visionary, but also making sure the business runs and being able to detach yourself from your product when it comes to reviews, right?
Okay.
I think a lot of the time you put a lot of your time and effort into a product or something that when there's a review given, you feel like as if it's a personal attack. And so a very simple metric that I use for that is more like it's two of us over here and it's the product or the idea over there. So it's two of us gossiping about the idea, right? And that way you're able to take criticism and reviews. And because some of the biggest critics that we've had have become our biggest supporters because they had very legitimate concerns. And I went back to them to say, oh, we've solved these. And well, they bought in, right? So I think no one is out there to do you harm. We should always assume the best. At worst, you just be disappointed. But at best, you get some of the best collaborations you'd ever have in your life. And so take advantage of every opportunity you have now.
No, that's quite profound. Now, last question. If you got to swap roles with any other career path, which one will it be?
If you had asked me this question about a year ago, I'd have said I would probably become a DJ, but Spotify just released the updates.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, but I feel like DJs are super cool, like being able to control a big group of people like that, and yeah, it's just
now I've gotten a glimpse into your music taste. I think it's quite exquisite. But aside being a DJ, you don't want to be a dancer or maybe a chef?
Maybe a chef, because I cook a lot.
Now that was such a striking conversation with the co-founder of Goliath Robotics, Barnabas NOMO. What I did take away from today's session is make sure to take advantage of every opportunity to serve you right in the future. Well, thank you very much, Barnabas, for coming on. My name is Archibald Nico Tamonkote. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell notification for all latest updates on the page. Till next time, bye-bye.